I'm Bishop Boudreaux, and I'm pleased to welcome you once again to our weekly program entitled The Lord Among Us. However, our format this week is going to be different. Instead of giving a little talk, we have a panel discussion based upon the fairly recent Bishop's Pastoral on the Economy. To introduce our panelists, I'm pleased to present to you Mr. Rob Gorman, who is the Associate Director of our Social Services Office in our Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux. Rob, will you do that for me, please?
Sure, be glad to, Bishop. Beginning on the Bishop's right is Miss Helen Gingrat. She's the Vice President of United Houma Nations and the Director of the Houma Tribal Center in Golden Meadow. Next to Helen is Joe Billiot. He's a board member of the Organization of Louisiana Fishermen, and he lives in Galliano. And next to me is Sherry Manuel. She lives at Lafourche Crossing, and she's on the board of A la Main, a crafts cooperative based in Houma.
Thank you very much, Rob. My dear friends, the purpose of our gathering today is, first of all, and I have this little chore to do, is to review briefly why the Catholic bishops of this country spoke on the economy in America. And it's not because we consider ourselves financiers or experts in finance. We speak as moral leaders with the responsibility to attack the practical issues of our lives. And the fact remains is that the biblical tradition of both the Old and the New Testament points to the fact that authentic religion is always concerned about the needy and the poor. In the Old Testament, prophet after prophet emphasized the fact that God was not pleased with the sacrifices of the people because they were not concerned about their fellow servants, about their brothers or sisters, their relatives or fellow citizens. In one occasion, when they were displeased because God was not listening to their prayers, through the prophet God said to them, he said, "I don't need your sacrifices. All the things of the earth are mine. This is the sacrifice that I desire, to lift the yoke from the oppressed and let the oppressed go free." When you see someone who is hungry, to feed him, and when he is naked, to clothe him. Do this, then shall your light shine like the dawn. Then you will cry, and I will answer. You will call, and I will say, "Here I am." And of course, we're all familiar with the great parable of Jesus of the Last Judgment, when Jesus identified our attitude and actions in feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, giving drink to the thirsty, saying that if you did this to them, you did it to me. So as moral leaders, we speak about our need to be concerned, if we are authentically religious, to the needs of the poor. Now, in the practical applications, I'm not going to take all the time here, I'm just trying to give the background. The bishop referred to several issues, primarily the question of poverty, unemployment, and the two are related, the question of food production, and all of these things have some practical application to us here in Louisiana. To talk about that is why we have our panel today, and I'm going to now turn over this discussion as it applies to us locally in general to our panel under the direction of Mr. Gorman.
Thanks, Bishop. You know, the reason I asked everybody to come today is because each of us have personal experiences through our lives and the organizations to which we belong with those issues that you just talked about: poverty, unemployment, food production. And each of us works every day of our lives in one of those particular areas and is touched by one of those areas, and in our own way are working to overcome one of those particular problems. So what we're going to do is just talk a little bit about the kind of efforts that we're involved in, our own personal experiences, and relate those to the pastoral, because I think one of the most important things that we have to do is translate what's in the Old Testament and New Testament into our everyday lives, and to make that connection. And so that's what we're doing here today. Maybe we could start with Joe. Joe's been a commercial fisherman all his life. and is from this area, and can just talk a little bit about the importance of the industry and the
let me say
function it
this,
serves.
in the pastoral, in the question of food production, and this is very important, they stress farming a great deal. Now that's important to us here too in Louisiana. They just made a sort of a reference, though, to the seafood and the environment. But I think maybe you won't emphasize that particular thing. The importance and the value of seafood production, well, not only for the sake of employment, but for the well-being of the nation. So whatever you want to say, Joe, it's all yours.
Okay. One thing we must understand that I come from a commercial fishing family, dating way back. And we are farmers of sort, farmers of the sea, you might say.
Sure, that's right.
And we have a way of life here that dates back many generations. And to do this, we must continually fight to keep it going, that we'll have something for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to do. And it's very important that they know and that everyone around us know that we need their support to keep this thing going because, for example, the commercial fishing industry brings in a lot of money to the state of Louisiana. And if we were put out of business, that's a lot of money that we would lose. Normally, anyone now, or before, whose job played out, he could rig up a little boat and go fishing. And it's getting today where you can't do that anymore.
It doesn't pay?
Well, we don't have the shrimping. The shrimps aren't there. We have shrimp farming that is putting us easily out of business,
Oh, that's right.
And we have other things, like the closure of all the canals and waterways that are hindering us.
So we have a lack of supply of seafood. We have the waterway regulations. What are some of the other obstacles that you can recall?
There are many.
Yeah.
I'd like to mention one while
Yeah,
I'm at it, and Joe can talk about it, is we have a great deal of coastal erosion in this area. One of the problems in Louisiana is that our marshes, the nursery for all those fish and all that seafood, the shrimp and everything that we rely on for our fisheries industry, those marshes are being destroyed. And we have 40% of the marshes in the United States. And we supply about 20, 30, 40% of the seafood for the United States. Yes. And that seafood grows up in these marshes right here in Terrebonne, Lafourche, St. Mary, Grand Isle. Our diocese are one of the most productive areas in the world. Yeah. And Joe can testify that if we don't save that, if we don't make a concerted effort to save those marshes, then we will lose our seafood industry. And before I turn it back to Joe just for a second, to mention that the Catholic bishops unanimously passed, along with the entire Methodist Conference for the state of Louisiana, a resolution urging parishioners to learn about coastal erosion issues and to get involved because it's a moral obligation. Because of exactly what you said, Bishop, in the pastoral, we talk about the need for jobs. We talk about the need for food production. And both those issues are dependent on the healthy marshes. Let me also mention, maybe Helen would like to say a few words about the work that she's been involved with most of her adult life.
Yeah, Rob, one of the things that I work with closely is with our Indian people, here in the community. One thing that hinders our Indian people, and like Joe says with the fishing, and they need that because a lot of our people don't have the education to say they can get a job in the public school system or, et cetera. So it's very important that our industry is kept, to a certain point here, even in Lafourche, Terrebonne, the parishes. The other thing that we're trying to do is that we have a JTPA program, which is on-the-job training that we have, going at the center, and that's to train people on-job training, classroom training, and that's one of the big things that, we're involved in, to try to educate our people so they can go out and get jobs.
Helen, that's very important because in the pastoral, a great deal of emphasis is placed upon the fact of the great number of very poor people in this country who are not only poor, but you refer indirectly to this. but don't have the means or the education or the opportunity to rise out of that poverty. So it perpetuates it from generation to generation. It breeds, it not only is poverty, it breeds poverty. And so education is an important factor.
One thing is that since I've been working with the tribe for about 23 years, and one good thing that I can see, you know, that has helped a lot is that we have now been able to keep our children in school. They are graduating from high school, which years ago did not happen. We have a Title IV program in the public school system that starts from grade 1 on to, you know, all the way to graduation. And we have made the kids proud of being Indian, number one. Number two, how important it was for them to stay in school and get that education. And that has done a lot, you know, for our Indian people here in the community.
Helen, I'll just ask you this particular question. Sometimes, you know, we find in statistics that among the minorities, which is the general for the smaller groups, whether it's blacks or Vietnamese or the Indians, we find that that many one-parent families are dominated by women. Is that true of the Indians? It is true, I know, in large measure of the blacks, that 1/3 of homes are ruled by one parent who is a woman, and she's got a job that doesn't pay enough, and she can't rise up from it. Is that a problem?
That happens a lot, yes.
Is
with
it
our
above
Indian
average?
people too. I'm not quite sure, so I wouldn't want to quote on something.
But I'm not
positive.
asking for any particular
Yeah,
percentage-wise,
yeah.
but it
we
is
have,
it is
yeah.
a problem. Huh?
Yes, they have a problem.
Well, it's a
with
problem
that.
everywhere today,
It's a
actually.
severe problem in some
Yeah.
areas.
And
more than others.
but among the minorities, where they have least chance of getting jobs, and there again we come now to the question of just wages. You know, if a
Right.
person gives a full day's work, they have to be paid sufficient to live, not only to get by, but to have a decent life, to educate their children.
And a lot of it's the jobs, is that they're not educated, so they can't get these good paying jobs, and that's a great disadvantage right there. You know, and this is why education is so important to, you know, to our children today.
One of the appeals that the conference makes, the Bishops' Conference makes, and of course it's all we can do is appeal, is to ask labor unions, private industry, the private sector, and government to work together in the spirit of cooperation to solve these problems. Just one side can't do it, because they have need of solution.
Speaking of jobs, another group that's working on providing jobs is Alama, and they're approaching jobs from the perspective of a cooperative, where the workers own the business. And Sherry's here representing Alama and can speak to that a little bit.
Well, we were established out of a need for employment or money coming in from some other source than our traditional forms of employment in this area. And as a group, there is a tremendous amount of craft people in this area, and the resource is fantastic. And on the national market, crafts are a very viable source of income. But because they have never been organized and put together in this area, and the education process of how to get them into the national market has not come about down here, they have been more or less individuals working shows or individual things. So we are trying to gather craftspeople in the area together and help them in whatever way they needed to be helped to make the money that they need to make to be able to either supplement their incomes or in some cases support themselves. That is the goal that we were founded for, and we have been working since February and have surprised ourselves in what we have found out and how well things do sell for us. And so we are getting our base together, and as we grow, we are finding that we are really going to be able to be helpful to a lot of people besides just us. And it has been a very fantastic experience for us to find out that we can take things that we enjoy doing and turn them into things that are going to be profitable for all of us.
You know,
So-
one thing that might be said is that 10% of the people, you know, commercial fishing people, feed the rest of the people in the world, the other 90%. And that's not a lot, no, when you come right down to the nitty-gritty. 10% of us are feeding the seafood to the rest of the world. But we need the backing of the rest of these people here, the consumers, to come up forward and say, look, we want to help you in whatever way. Give us a phone call, talk to us. Let us know that you want to help us, and that's what we want. You know, we need your help because we're doing it for you. I can't eat all what I catch. I have to have someone out there buying what I catch so that I can make a living.
One more little point I want to ask you about, Joe, and it kind of baffles me. I think things are changing. The fact of this à la main craft program shows that maybe shows that we have finally learned not to put all of our eggs in oil and gas, which was the tragic mistake economically that we made. And we relied upon it, and we thought it was always going to be. And all this time, all this talent was lying dormant. And we had the talent. We have one of the richest states in the Union. We have gas and oil, on which we counted too much, but they still can be a valuable resource. We have sulfur. We have salt. We have a good earth that can grow practically anything. We have wildlife. We have, as you say, tremendous seafood potential. And we just have not used what we have about us. And I hope and pray that the sadness and the sorrow and the pain suffered in the depression that has hit us has given us a wisdom that will make us strike out and use all of these things. And we can't just blame sometimes just the government. We just can't blame the private sector. I think we all have to share some of the blame. That we were too content with the easy money, and we let all these magnificent things. We let our coastline corrode. We let the waters be polluted. We let the Chafalaya Basin get treated like it was a dump, if you'll forgive me, by exaggeration. All of which has endangered, and this is immoral, because God made us caretakers of his good earth. And that's why we have to always see the moral dimension. I was driving to, some time ago, and I tried to avoid it now, the Luling Bridge going to the airport. And I passed on a road going from the River Road to Highway 61. And I tell you the truth, I never saw a buyer so polluted with garbage bags and trash, and I said, God, this is sinful. We have polluted the earth that God gave us. And so we have to all make a turnabout. We need a conversion of heart. We really do, to understand, and that's why the bishop spoke out. You know, it's not easy to criticize this great nation because it's the best hope of the world. In spite of all our stupidity, forgive me, we are the best hope of the free world. But we have to look at ourselves and see that we are making a lot of mistakes that already have had and will begin to have increasingly tragic consequences for the economy and the well-being of all of our people.
One thing that
I wonder how I have to find out how we're standing with time, because I don't know. I don't want, seem like we have 5 more minutes. We just a big family here, so we can do this type of thing. We have 5 more minutes, so we're not finished yet. Okay, now I want to bring one little point, and maybe we all can comment on this. I like your expression, we are farmers of the sea. But since the land farmers have no one here to speak for them, I want to point out a growing tragedy. Since let's say the last 25 years, about 2% of all farming, or 2 or 3%, is done by the huge farm. The small farmer is being put out of business. Now, this is more than just an economic situation. This is a tragic cultural loss of families who, like your own in fishing, Joe, have been on the farm for years, and he's part of their culture, and he contributes a great deal to the culture of our country. But they're being driven from their farms altogether. And besides that, did you know that the bankruptcy laws protect the farmer less than any other person? He is if I remember correctly, he is the only person who can lose his home in a bankruptcy clause. Everybody else, I think, basically, on the title of bankruptcy alone, cannot lose their home. The farmer loses everything. And yet, speaking of food, look how we depend upon these people to survive. But we go about that and we let all these things happen, and we don't seem to care. It's not that we're malicious, we don't think. And I think, my dear people, the purpose of our being here today, the purpose of the Bishop's Pastoral, is to try to awaken the conscience of the nation to the crime and the sadness of poverty, to the tragedy of unemployment, to the dangers to our food production in this area, because it may be, if we don't wake up to the situation, we may find that we're all too late. And so we have just to summarize this, we have a few minutes left, but we have seen today that the Indian is struggling to be educated, to be prepared for good jobs, so that he can improve his condition or she can improve her condition. After all, they are the real Americans, right?
Right.
The real Americans, okay. We owe this to them to give them every opportunity. The fishermen, and this is touching us here in our diocese. This is not some foreign land. Joe has pointed out the dangers to the difficulties of the fishing industry, and in our program next week we're going to continue. There's more I want to say about this of why we don't have other things, but we'll talk about that next week. Helen,
Sure.
right? I'm sorry. This is Helen. Getting my women mixed up here. Sharon is talking about the hope that is present with us, that these talented people who do such magnificent things with their hands, the crafts people of our area, don't think there are more talented people anywhere in the world, are finally finding a way to make this not only contribute to the happiness of people and to the culture of our area, but to their financial well-being. So we have just about enough time for our closing hymn. So Rob and my dear friends, we thank you for being with us today, and we hope that you will listen. Oh, we have more than that. We're all a big family. Okay. So let me come back to the more things I can say about the pastoral. You know, one of the great sadnesses of our time, this relates to the food industry more than anything else, and relates to unemployment. Two tragedies. The number of children in this country who don't get enough nourishment each day for their physical and emotional health. Secondly, the elderly who, with their, maybe it's just the small social security checks, are in many instances on the verge of falling below, what shall we call it? The acceptable poverty line, if we can call it that. The elderly and children. Where? In the third world, in the richest nation in the history of mankind. How can it be? But it's happening here. Don't be angry with the bishops when they tell you the truth. But let the biblical teachings, so clear, if you have a chance to get the document or something, read it. God's word convince you that they spoke as the moral leaders and it was their duty to do so. Now, you may differ in some of the practical applications, but you've heard some of them here. And the bishops can't be too far off base when these same problems, unemployment, poverty, struggling for need of education, are touching our own people. The Indians, the fishermen, the craftsmen, the farmer, the young and the old. So let's all think about this, my dear friends, and remember, the government can't do it alone, the private sector can't do it alone, capital can't do it alone, and the unions can't do it alone. But I hope that we all be made conscious of the need and work together to build in the right sense what we like to call, for every citizen, the American dream. Until next week then, God bless and keep you, and we hope you'll be watching us again. My dear friends, once again, I'm pleased to welcome you to our weekly program on this station, which we call The Lord Among Us. I'm Bishop Boudreaux. If you watched us last week, you know that we had a panel discussion about the bishop's pastoral on the economy. We gave the general principles of that pastoral and made some general applications through the panel discussion as they affect us here in Louisiana. We're going to continue that same basic theme today, with the same panelists and with Mr. Gorman, our Associate Director of Social Services of our diocese. But before we get into that, let's have our opening hymn by our harmony trio, then we will be back. Well, my dear people, here we are back again, as I said we would be, and I once again want to express our thanks to our harmony trio for their presence on our program. Before we get into the subject matter, continuing our discussion of last week on the Bishop's Pastoral and his application to our area, I'd like to ask Mr. Gorman, whom I, as I announced before, is the Associate Director of our Office of Social Services in our Diocese of Houma-Thibodaux, once again to introduce the members of our panel. Rob, if you will, please.
Well, thanks for having us back, Bishop. This time I'll start on my left with Sherry Manuel from Lafourche Crossing, representing the crafts cooperative called A la Main. And next to Sherry is Joseph Billiot. He's a board member of the Organization of Louisiana Fishermen and lives in Galliano. And next to Joe is Helen Gingrat, the Vice President of United Houma Nations, the Director of the Houma Tribal Center in Golden Meadow, and she lives here in Golden Meadow.
Thank you. Fine. Thank you, Rob. Well, now, the old saying that repetition is the mother of students impels me to, for those of you who may have forgotten or who have watched us only this week and not last week we summarized the Bishop's Pastoral on the major items. First of all, we pointed out that the Bishop spoke not as financiers or experts of finance, but as moral teachers. And in the first part of the pastoral, they give all the overwhelming evidence that the biblical tradition, in other words, the teaching of God's Word in both the Old and the New Testament, constantly calls for, as a proof of one's authentic religious practice, and one's proper attitude to God and our fellow man, one cannot be authentically Christian or religious unless he or she has concern for the needy and the poor. If you doubt it, check the scriptures, you'll find it's true. Then we pointed out some of the major practical recommendations and problems of the pastoral, as pointed out. The great poverty level in our country, the problems facing us, a grave problem of unemployment, and the question of food production, both land farming and what Joe likes to call farmers of the sea, very poetically. And we saw some of the problems that facing us, and we were suggesting some solutions. Now we're going to try to apply something called the Human Development Fund, sponsored by the Catholic Church in this country, that tries to help people who want to help themselves. But for this purpose, I'm going to turn it over again to Rob, who will conduct at least most of the rest of our interview.
Thanks, Bishop. Again, what I'd like to emphasize is what you mentioned, is that last week we talked about problems. What I'd like to talk about this week is how do you solve those problems? How do you begin to work on those problems? And the answer is you organize. And you organize the people who are suffering from the problem. And that's what each of our guests here today have done. They've created or participated in an organization of like-minded people who are trying to help themselves out of poverty, help themselves to a job, help themselves to be able to continue their way of life, not relying exclusively on anyone else to solve their problem, but taking the initiative themselves and forming an organization. As I mentioned, we've got 3 organizations represented: Alameda Crafts Cooperative, the Organization of Louisiana Fishermen, and United Home Nations. And those 3 organizations have had tremendous impact in our diocese and, in fact, across the state. And each of our guests can talk a little bit about their organizations. And they're great folks. You know, since we're in South Louisiana, they all exemplify the spirit of the notion of lâche pas la patate.
Yeah.
You just hang in there and you keep struggling day after day in spite of the frustrations, and eventually you'll succeed. And I'd maybe like, in that spirit, let Helen speak first. She's been struggling with her cause of tribal recognition for many years and has hung in there as long as anyone else. And I'd just like to give her a chance to talk about the successes that they've had.
First of all, may I say, do I understand correctly that the mere fact that you know an Indian tribe exists, and we certainly know it does, is not enough for the government, that there must be some formal recognition by the government to get, will you explain that? I know I am ignorant about this, and I'm sure that most of our listeners are too, Helen. They might be more compassionate to your problem if they understand it.
Yes, that is right. We had to take and do an ancestry and history on every one of our people for the federal government, which you do genealogy. We have found our history from the 16 and 1800 of our people that existed, that lived along the bayous, and how they migrated down into, into the parts of where, where our people are now. It's been like a 23-year struggle for me, doing that. We have recently sent all our data into Washington, which was on September the 30th, and we've mailed them 10 boxes of paper that we've mailed to them of our ancestry and our history. Now, they have that, and it's going to be reviewed.
Now, the purpose of this is that the government must officially recognize you as a tribe. Is that it?
Right.
Now, what is the reason why you do this?
The reason we do this is, number one, if we do get federally recognized, it's going to open a lot of doors to our people. Number one, it'll be health, the education, housing, and a lot of other, things that is going to be able to help the people. And the 3 important things I would say is health and education. We have a lot of our people that can't go to hospitals, doctors, they don't have money, and that would help, a lot
So
with
it's very
that
important
problem.
to have the recognition.
It is very
I
important.
didn't mean to interrupt you, but anyhow, so you've been working at this for a long time, huh?
Yes, quite a long time, and I'm feeling very good about it because we have finished all the genealogy, and it's been a long time, and we've had a lot of help from, you know, a lot of people. We were funded for 2 years from CHD, I think, which comes from, you know,
We'll
from
talk about
the
HCHD in
Archdiocese
just a moment. That's good.
with Rob, and we had an A&A grant that helped us along. We had a lot of volunteers that came and helped us with the paperwork. We only had 3 or 4 people at the office, and we needed typists real bad, and you know, a lot of us couldn't type, so we have had a lot of help also from, you know, individuals out there, which we appreciate very much.
But you have the satisfaction that you were doing this yourself, with help, of course.
That's right.
But you were the one keeping it alive, right?
Right. We formed a 15-member board, which represented 5 parishes, Lafourche, Taborn, Jefferson, St. Bernard, and St. Mary. We have members from each parish, which is elected by our people. They're elected, you know, by the people. We run for office. And we also represent other parishes and out of state. We have a lot of people, of our Indian people that, you know, that lives out of state, which are registered on our tribal roll. Our tribal roll right now has 11,223 members, which are Indian descent from the Houma, you know, Houma people.
That surprises me. That 11,000 surprises me.
So-
I thought it was about 3,000 or 4,000, which shows how we need to be educated about one another.
Right.
Isn't it true? That's why this program has value. You see, we're learning a lot of things today, my dear friends.
You know, one thing that might be mentioned too, you said that you didn't know, you know, as far that the Indians were, the Homas were not recognized. There, if I'm correct, and Helen might correct me if I'm not, but I believe that there are about 100 other tribes who are not recognized, federally recognized by the federal government because of the same thing as we're facing now. And these people has to have help as we have had. And it's for the people around them, you know, the people of the communities and parish and the state, to also help them too. We appreciated every little bit of help that we've gotten from anybody. But people need to know this, that you're not because you're Indian that you have any privileges. You know, you're not automatically recognized. Your tribe is not recognized until the federal government says you are.
I guess it's because you were never on a reservation of any kind, huh? From the very beginning or something like that, where they could keep tab on you, if you forgive me for putting it that way.
Well, yes, one of the things of the federal government was that if they don't fight or they don't say anything, just leave them alone,
Yeah.
say we won't bother. And if you got out there and really caused a lot of ruckus and had wars with everybody, he had to make, you know, at that point, they have to come up and have a
Sign
treaty,
a
make
peace
a
treaty.
treaty,
Yeah,
see.
there was some recognition.
So
Yeah,
along the
well,
line,
that answers my question very well.
right, we, evidently along
There
the
had to
line
be
here,
some
we were
action.
very
If you were peaceful, you didn't get it.
Right, we were very peaceful. We accepted the French and the English when they came, and so we just like sort of was a forgotten, you know, a forgotten people at one point.
I think the important story here for the listeners here today, Bishop, is that, again, through the power of organizing,
Yeah,
the Houma Indians have been able to have a tremendous success against great many odds, and they're pursuing the goal of federal recognition, and are well on their way to federal recognition. And I think that's the important thing, is that here's a daily, right in our own home example of living out that pastoral, of people organizing to pull themselves out of poverty, to pursue the goals, and to work against poverty and unemployment. And that's also, I might, switching to Sherry, exactly what Alain has attempted to do, is people forming a cooperative to create jobs. And that cooperative notion where the workers own the business is what Sherry's organization is all about.
Before we get back to Sherry, though, maybe our people would like you to explain the letter CHD that Helen just mentioned. She says we got some help from CHD.
Yeah, everybody here.
And I'm
has-
sure that
yeah.
that's a mystery to most people out there.
Okay.
Even though they contribute to it, they don't know what it is, I'm sure.
If I can put in a plug for the Campaign for
Well,
Human
I think we ought
Development.
to, because it's doing, and tell them the conditions thereof.
The Campaign for Human Development is the Catholic Bishops' social action program, which is designed to help organizations which are trying to lift people out of poverty through their own efforts, through creation of jobs or other means. And Catholics throughout the country on the third Sunday of November, which is coming up later this month, will donate to a collection in their churches, and that money is put into a national pool, which is then distributed to various organizations throughout the country. We've been fortunate to have the 3 organizations represented here today receive Campaign for Human Development funding to help them to pursue their goals. And it hasn't been the majority of their funding, but in all 3 cases, it's come at a very important and critical time to help them continue to survive. And so I think the folks watching today can feel good about that.
They're helping their brothers and sisters.
Yeah, we're pulling together. We're helping our own people. We're helping people organize. It's not a handout program. It's a program to help people form those organizations to work toward their goals.
Rabbi, I'm glad you're making that clear, but to use the language that our people like to use sometimes with bitterness. The Human Development Fund, which the bishops sponsor and distribute, is not a welfare program in the sense that it's a handout for people who need help. It's to help those who are organizing to help themselves. It's a self-help program that they will sponsor. For example, if let's say this is an example. Say you out there, some of you dear ladies out there want to form a sewing business, and you need someone to teach people how to sew other than yourselves. You make an application. You say, we want to start this sewing organization, this company of people to sew things. We need instructors. They'd probably send you some money to pay for that instructor because you're doing something yourself to help yourself. That's what we mean by a self-help program.
Well, that leads right into
Well, that's what I say. Now we go right to our friend here in Alaman. I love that name. For you to understand French, means Alaman means by hand. Alaman, right?
Right. Alaman was created in the midst of a crisis because when the oil and gas prices went haywire and our area became so severely troubled with unemployment, we realized that we had resources that we had never taken into account before, and that we had to come up with some alternate ways of being able to take care of ourselves. And there was a foresighted group of people in the Houma area who organized and convinced about 70 crafters that, we did have a viable trade that we could actually use to support ourselves and to help support our families. So through the course of getting the organization done, we acquired 1,500 feet of building space in DuPont store that they're letting us use for shop space. We now have around 65 crafters who are displaying and selling their goods through the store. We are getting at last to see the end of the paperwork and the organizational work so that we're ready to reach out and say that any other crafter who feels the need or wants to get into the organization, we are now accepting new members so that we can grow a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger. Our shop has been very successful. Our craftspeople are working in the shop on a daily basis, displaying, demonstrating, working, talking to the customers, that type of thing. We have set our cooperative rules into effect, and we will become a cooperative, as close to a cooperative as the state of Louisiana will allow us to be as of April the 1st. And at that time, we will take on our final structure. But right now, we are looking forward to a successful Christmas season and are beginning to look at ways that we can spread our influence and reach into other areas and draw from those areas into this area so that we can help here.
I'd like to ask a question. When I first saw the magnificent wood carvings down here several years ago, the magnificent work that is done, it immediately came to my mind, can we keep this going? And I asked some of the men, just in cutoff, I think the first year I was here, I couldn't believe the beauty of the magnificent thing. I said, is anyone trying to keep this tradition going? He said, oh yes. And he showed me this 18-year-old boy who had a very fine display. And I asked him, I said, forget his name now. I said, how do you do this? And he said a cute thing. He said, Bishop, he said, you take a piece of wood and you cut away everything that doesn't look like a duck. But I didn't say that for the sake of the joke, but I was glad to see that the young people, in fact, I was presented as a gift to our retreat house some 14 or 15 magnificent carvings of some of our fine people here. And you know, the best known of all, you know his name. Yeah, Tan. Tan's son that year, they both Tan gave me they both gave me little pieces, and I got some magnificent things. Tan's son had won the world championship, a young man, and so that reassured me that this, and about your craftspeople. Are you seeing to that too?
Yes, definitely.
And
The
I-
youngest member of our cooperative is 18 years old.
Yeah. Well, that's great because it's just a talent we cannot lose.
Let me put in too, Bishop, for the folks watching the show, an unpaid commercial message, and really encourage people this Christmas to buy Christmas presents at the cooperative store, which is located in DuPont's department store in Houma. Folks wonder, you know, what can I do as part of my everyday life to support social justice measures in our diocese? Here's an easy way. Do a little Christmas shopping through the cooperative. And also, of course, donate to the Campaign for Human Development collection. And again, that collection has also funded the other organization represented here today, the Organization of Louisiana Fishermen, which Joe is representing with us here today.
Well,
Joe,
first
you
thing
give us how you got started. It'd be interesting because this is vital to not just us, to the world. We feed. I'm told 40% of the seafood consumed in this country comes from Louisiana. Now, whether it's true or not, I do not know.
I don't know exactly how much it is, but
It's a lot,
It's a
for sure.
lot. But one thing I would like to say about her, the craft, is that we do have a lot of Houma Indian who can do that. You know, who does that. Very good.
And they're members of the cooperative too, by the way, and are selling through their Houma Indian crafts at the Alamas store.
We are a multi-talented people. You know, we can do a lot of things.
Well, of course, that's the whole thing.
As far as our organization, what we need is a lot more people to join the Organization of Louisiana Fishermen. Those guys who are out there complaining about something that is not going right, step forward, come and join with us
And help you.
so that we can do something for you, because we are fighting your battle. And it's a lot easier for a guy to stay sitting at home and say, well, Joe or the organization is doing this, I don't have to join. That's not true. We need their help. We need them to get up there on the bandwagon with us. And you don't have to step up front. Somebody else will.
Joe-
As long as you're in the background,
Joe, we're
your
running a little
voice is
short
heard.
of time. We have a couple minutes left, but I'm interested in what particular goals would you like to accomplish? Are you looking for better prices? Are you looking for more stability? Are you looking for better working conditions? What has to be improved that you'd like to see improved?
All of the above. All of the above.
Okay, that's what I want to know. In other words, you think your group feels that, in other words, that the working conditions, the water conditions, the canal conditions, the regulations affecting canal, all this is cramping your style. May I put
Cramping
it that
our
way?
way of life, right?
Forgive me, Joe, but I don't know whether you get the money, but why order seafood in restaurants and pay $5 or $6 to get 6 shrimp? I figure you guys are making a lot of money. Who's getting the money?
I don't know who's getting the money, but it is not the commercial fishermen. That I can assure you.
Yeah, but you know, I'm laughing, but you know it's true. But
It is true.
sometimes
It
the
is
middleman gets it. See.
We have no idea where the money is going to, but it is not coming in our pocket.
And now, is it true that you get help from CHS? For the
Yes,
Human
we
Development
do.
Fund?
I think this is the second or third years in a row that we were getting funded from
You know, I'd like to correct one mistake. Not that I. If we had the money to help, we would. But we have been told. It's been said that the church, the diocese, built boats for the Vietnamese. That we're funding you and we're funding you. We don't have the money to do it as a diocese. So I don't want anybody to think out there that we're taking their money in the collection basket for anything like this. Though, if we could, I'd have no objection to it, provided our people knew about it, because I wouldn't want to deceive them. But this is coming from a national collection because of the national bishop's responsibility as a group of bishops in this country to provide for the citizens of this country opportunity for growth, to rise out of the level of poverty. Well, we've run short of time. It's been a delightful gathering. We thank all of you for being on our panel this week and last week. Our thanks to you, and may God prosper your works all. Until next week, God bless you all.
The wind is singing the spirit.